Our next example demonstrates the foreach repetition statement, which is the last of C#'s control statements that we have not yet introduced. Now, the foreach statement is meant specifically for touching every element of an array or every element of a collection object, and we'll talk about collection objects starting a bit later on. Now, in the main method of this simple example, we have an array called array of type int, and we've hard-coded some initial values into that array. And this is basically a re-implementation of the sum array example that we looked at a little bit earlier in this lesson. So we've also declared a total variable, which is set to 0 initially. And here's the first foreach repetition statement that we've looked at. The first line of the foreach statement starts with the keyword foreach, and it consists of a range variable and the in keyword, and then the, in this case, array that we wish to iterate over. Now, the range variable has to match up with the type of the array itself, so we know that it's an array of ints, which we can also see by hovering over it. Therefore, we've declared the variable number as type int. And in fact, as we get into the relationships between classes, the more appropriate way to say how the range variable is declared is that it must be consistent with the type of the elements inside the array or collection that we're manipulating. And we'll talk more about that in a later example once we've discussed the concepts of inheritance and the relationships between classes. Now, what happens in a foreach statement is that one at a time from the beginning of the array towards the end, the statement automatically takes one element of the array and assigns it to the range variable, in this case number. So that is the actual value of one of the elements, not the index number of an element. And then I can take that value and add it to the total. So if I go ahead here and just insert a breakpoint and start debugging, we can see that as we step into the loop, the variable array refers to our array of 10 elements, and the variable number, in this case, let's step into the body. All right, so the variable number is the first element in the array, 87 at this point. If I continue to step, it's now going to tell me that the next value is 68, and you can see that's the second element, and let's just do it one more time. If I hover over it, you see the next element is 94. So one element at a time, it automatically works its way through all of the elements in the array specified to the right of the keyword in and accesses each of those elements. So if I stop this program and run it without the debugger, you can see that once again the total of these elements is 849, just like the earlier example that demonstrated summing the elements of the array with counter-controlled repetition. Now, if you need access to the index number of the elements in the array, then you would want to use a counter-controlled loop for that purpose. The benefit of the foreach is the guarantee that you will touch every element of the array. The other thing is you wind up with a copy of a given element in your range variable during each iteration of this loop. If the range variable is representing a simple type like an int, because you're working on a copy of that int, you cannot modify the copy, so the original array values remain intact. If, on the other hand, it's an array of references to objects, and those objects have methods that allow you to modify the objects, you could call those methods to perform modifications on an individual object. However, you cannot use the foreach statement to physically modify the actual array elements. Remember that a simple type array contains actual values of the array's type. A reference type array contains references to objects in memory, not the objects themselves.